Okay, so the first learning to look strategy that I want to introduce you to this morning is jumping in. Okay, so when you think about this idea of jumping into a portrait, what do you think of?
Like stepping into it as if you were there.
Okay, so this idea of actually being in the scene, right? We so often, when we're looking at artwork, we are, the third party, right? And so the idea of jumping in is that we get the opportunity to think about what it's like to be in the artwork. Okay, so if you were a group of students, what I would have you do, and I'm not going to make you do this, I would have you stand up and I would have you think about where you're going to jump in, and then we'd count to 3 and then we would jump. But not in, just sit down, okay? So what I'd love for you to do is just take about 30 seconds, take a look at this piece, and think about if you could jump into it, where you would go. And just know that you can be as big as you are now, you can be very small, it's up to you, but where would you go? So just think about that. All right, if you could jump in, where would you go, and why did you choose that spot? Catherine.
Okay, so I picture myself as a child and kind of by his right elbow.
Okay.
Because I feel like I give the impression that I should be listening to him. He's explaining something to me.
Okay.
And I should be looking up at whatever he's trying to show me. And I think I see myself as a child because he looks like somebody I would trust.
Okay.
And want to be with.
Sort of a grandfather type of figure. Okay. Okay, excellent. Amy.
I don't know if I'd actually be an actual human.
Okay.
I was thinking that I would want to be somewhat of the flower.
Okay.
Because he has this beautiful, like, loving soul kind of feeling, and he's looking at it with such love that I would want to be a part of that, like, love, to feel that.
Okay.
He has something that it must be so special, or something he was so proud of, or something that he's just so familiar with, that feeling of being that. I think that, and not like a little tiny fairy or something, but
right.
something that's there.
Right.
That would be a part of his feeling for that plant.
Okay, good. Other ideas? Shantae?
I said I would be like kind of behind the plant in the distance slightly.
Okay.
Because of the same thing, is I feel like that he's doing something of significance and all of this knowledge that he has because of his age, and I would want to be there to see it, not necessarily engage, because we act differently when we know that somebody's there watching us.
Right.
And so be off to the distance slightly so that I can still see and hear what he's doing.
Okay.
But that it doesn't change what he's doing, you know?
Okay. So if he were speaking, if you were hearing what he was saying, what do you think he would be talking about?
I think he would be talking to the plants.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see him talking to the plants about what he appreciates from them, the purpose that they have,
Okay.
For his use and things like that. That's what I think I would see and hear in the distance.
Okay, excellent. Other ideas? Stephen?
For the same reason, I think I would be up in the tree because it wouldn't hold me, but if it would, I would be up in the tree because I like to learn by observing and so sort of taking it all in. So very similarly, that would be my role in the picture, but I would be up there.
Okay.
Good vantage point.
Think about texture, and think about the branches of the tree and the leaves of the tree. What do you think they're going to feel like?
Soft. I mean, it's
Okay.
also, it looks like it's still spring, so
Okay.
there's still new growth coming.
Okay. We don't have a very full tree yet, do we? But these are definitely green leaves, so it's giving us this idea that it's spring versus any other season. Okay, excellent.
I see gentleness throughout the whole painting.
Okay, so if you could go someplace in the piece, where would it be?
I think it would be by his right elbow as well.
Okay,
Someone else mentioned that.
okay. Does the flower smell? Do you think?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay,
I don't think they do,
okay, okay.
but thank you.
Other ideas? Where else would you jump? Patrick?
I don't know if it hurts to know a bit about the painting, but
Yeah.
I would be pretending I was one of his students, and probably place myself where most of you had imagined too, listening to him. It seems almost too humble considering who he is,
Right.
The painting. And when you talk about gentleness and what he went through, and how important he is. And I originally mistook him for a gardener at the White House or something, when
Right.
in actuality, I think that gentleness captured me. And then once I was in, I realized how significant he was when I wanted to learn more about him.
Right.
So I would put myself in a place of learning, wherever that would be.
Okay, okay. It certainly doesn't hurt to know who it is as we look at this piece, and I think it's one more way to engage with the object. And so I think when you think about the fact that this is George Washington Carver, and if we know him, if we don't know him, I think it leads to a whole host of other ideas and other questions that we might have about the object. And so, who knows about Carver? Shantae, what can you tell us? Putting you on the spot.
More hands should have went up. Peanuts. I mean, as soon as I think about him, I think about peanuts and all the different uses that he developed for peanuts.
Right, right. And so it was peanuts, and it was also sweet potatoes. And the story goes that he created over 450 different uses for those two crops, right? And so when you think about that kind of contribution, we think scientist, right? But how is he being portrayed here?
Hobby gardener or
Gardener. Okay, a hobby gardener. Okay. Other ideas? Mia, you were thinking about saying something.
Yeah, I feel like in this portrait, he seems to be conveying sort of a subservient, complacent position rather than
Okay.
a position of really power and influence and invention, innovation.
Right.
Those really strong connotations and associations we have of him, or that we should have of him, aren't conveyed in the docile gentleness of this portrait, which isn't to say it's bad or wrong, but it leaves, there's more to be said.
Right. It's not what you expected
Yeah,
of an image of Carver, right? But I like the word that you said, gentle, and then I like the word that Patrick said, which was humble. And so we get this different view of him. And so when we think about this portrait and we think about this object, what do you think he's doing, Catherine?
I kind of, when I look at the flowers and I see the white flower and then I see the red flower and then I see the flower in the middle that's white and kind of red, I think of him like a scientist, like experimenting. Was he
Right.
combining two different types of flowers to create something new? And if that's, what your true love is about, then that's why I see love and kind of like dedication.
Okay.
So I don't see maybe like strength for what you expect from who he was.
Right.
But I feel love and passion
Right.
for it.
Okay.
And I think that the way that the creases in his forehead
Yeah.
and the way he's looking, that's a thinking, that's a thinking face where he's contemplating something and obviously joyous about it, which I think is the whole gentleness or simplicity of the painting. But I'm also wondering about his clothing,
Right.
which I was curious. I don't know. I that throws me off a little bit.
Okay, why?
It looks formal, too formal for me. He has a tie and it looks like a cashmere sweater and a,
Right?
you know, and a beautiful pressed white shirt. And not that I'm surprised that he's wearing that outfit
Right.
in the place of where he is.
Okay.
of
So
wearing that.
Right, so when we talk about visual elements within a portrait, we start to think about how things fit together.
Yes.
And within this piece, the clothing and the setting are not necessarily fitting together for you.
No.
Okay, okay. Mia?
I wonder if what he's doing is extracting or removing something from the flower with the intention of preserving or saving it or studying it.
Okay, so the longer we look at this piece, the more we're thinking that he's actually working on some sort of scientific experiment, something like that.
Oh yeah, I don't think this is for a floral arrangement.
Okay.
I don't think he's making a bouquet for anybody, but I think
Okay.
like what he's holding seems to be pretty, and I don't know if this is a function of the angle or
Right.
if it's a function of, or if it's authentic, but it looks to be pretty thin.
Yeah.
So it's not a pair of shears, it's not,
Right.
and he appears to be reaching inside the flower as opposed to cutting from the stem to create a floral arrangement. So
Okay.
that gives me the impression that he has more of an intention and it's more of a specific, he has a purpose for this
Right.
beyond an aesthetic
Right,
bouquet.
okay. Jane?
Yes, I think the more I look at I see his hands, and his hands tell a lot.
Yeah,
You see hardworking hands.
Okay.
You see aged hands.
right,
You see age, of course, with him, with his hair color, maybe lines in his eyebrows. But if you focus in on his hands, I think they're very, very prominent in this painting.
right.
And you see botany here. He's a botanist.
Right,
Yes,
right.
that's what came to my mind as opposed to.
And one of the reasons why using this portrait with young people works so well actually goes back to the hands, which is that Carver is in the act of doing something, right? It's not a formal portrait with the sitter facing out at all of us. We get this glimpse into his life because he is doing something. And so then it becomes a wonderful question, what is he doing, right? Other thoughts?
I would just add that to everything we've said about the, like as we try to figure out what he's doing, our first impressions were so much about the gentleness and how loving he seems with his work. And then now we're talking about this tool with his right hand, but he's like, to do such fine motor skills, right? Like if we were doing this, even if we knew how, if we'd been doing it for a short amount of time, we would still be like, he's so relaxed, like we would be much more focused and like really losing ourselves and making sure we get it exactly right. He knows he's gonna get it right. I see so much confidence of just the years and years of whatever the technical skills that he knows and he has. It just seems so confident, but in the body of a really elderly person, that's why it feels so gentle to us. But in fact, there's like super duper confidence and confidence there to be able to just, and now I'm going to do this little thing, but in fact it's probably very complicated.
And I think that goes back to his face as well, don't you think so?
Yeah.
Because
that muscle memory.
yeah, it is. Because he has such a serious, I'm just going to take care of this right now and do this look to his face.
Okay, okay. It is focused, right? It's very focused.
Definitely.
And so one of the things that I learned along the way about Carver once I started learning about this piece was that we think about peanuts and we think about sweet potatoes and we think about sharecropping and how Carver said, don't just do cotton, because if you do cotton, it's going to deplete the land resources. So his idea was to switch out the crops, right, from year to year. But Carver had this passion. He created this hybrid amaryllis. And that is what he's working on here. And so when we think about how somebody gets portrayed, in what way, and again, going back to this idea of purpose, this piece was created for the Harmon Foundation collection, which came into the museum's collection many years ago. But basically, in the 30s and 40s, the Harmon Foundation commissioned 2 female artists, Betsy Graves Raynaud and Laura Wheeler Waring, to go around the country and paint portraits of African Americans who were making significant contributions. And so this was one of the pieces that was created. And then once all of these pieces came together, I think that there were probably about 50 portraits, they traveled around the country as an exhibition, a traveling exhibition, an early traveling exhibition, which I think is fantastic. And then after that exhibition was over, this piece came into the collection of the Smithsonian as a sort of general entity, and then was moved into the collection of the Portrait Gallery. My understanding is that Carver did not like to sit for his portrait, and this might actually be the only painted portrait of him that was ever created. There are wonderful, wonderful photographs of him in his laboratory at Tuskegee, but this is the only piece that we get to see where he's out, where he's working on something that is a hobby, but is still very much science related, right? Yes?
Is that a reason why they have him in this setting, is because he might have been like, I'm not gonna sit, I have work to do, and you can.
Very well could be.
In the background.
Right, right.
Work
It very well could be. And when you think about how the artists were trying to portray the sitters for the Harmon Foundation collection, a lot of them are in the process of doing something. We see it a little bit less with Thurgood Marshall, but Marian Anderson, she's at the Lincoln Memorial, she's outside. Mary McLeod Bethune upstairs, we see her in this space with a globe and another painting behind her. So a story was trying to be told with each of these portraits, and I think that those artists, both of them, did a very good job at it.
Who was the other artist? Betsy Graves Raynaud
And Laura Wheeler Waring.
And you said the 40s and 50s or 30s?
30s and 40s, yeah. Yes. Any final thoughts or questions before we move on? Thank you.